Hi there, Gabriel here, SEO manager at Hike SEO, and in this video we're going to be talking about international SEO, what it is, and this is a beginner's guide for anyone who has a website that targets multiple languages and or countries. So let's dive in. So what you'll learn is what it's all about, who needs it, why do you need it, and what the main benefits of international SEO are. So what is international SEO? It's basically the practice of improving the search engine optimization for your website with multiple languages and or targeting multiple countries or locations for the purpose of obviously increased visibilities in those languages and countries. So who needs it? Basically any business who wants to reach a larger audience in the existing country that they're in or a local area. Or expand their business into new countries or local areas. So why do you need international SEO? It's to make sure that the right content page appears in the right search engine based on its language and intended country. So what can happen here is, let's say you have 3 different content pages, one in English, 2 in French, but one of the French articles you're targeting to France, the customers in France, while the other one you're targeting to French customers in the UK. Now, Google UK or any other search engine might get confused as to, okay, which French page do I return in the search engine results? Is it the UK one? Is it the France one? They look very similar. They look the same. So when international SEO is done correctly, you can see that now you're specifying what it's intended for. So the English UK one is showing up in Google UK. The French UK one is showing up in Google UK, but the French language version. And the French France content is showing up in Google FR in French. So you can see how now the search engines know which content to return in which search engine for which language. So why do you need it? Basically, the main thing is to avoid the risk of duplicate content. And this is a big thing. Duplicate content basically appears when you have multiple pages and you're not telling search engines where each page should be displayed or which one should be displayed. So, and what happens if you have duplicate content is it can basically, the keywords that are targeting that can cannibalize each other, meaning you're going to hurt your rankings over time. And you'll reach a glass ceiling as how high you can actually rank because they'll compete for each other. So that's why it's really important to make sure if you're targeting multiple languages and or countries, to make sure it's implemented so that you won't hurt your rankings. So basically it tells which piece of content is unique for specific language or country. So here's an example. So we have those 3 pages. Google returns the English UK one, but now it's confused as to which French one to return. So it's going to either return both and they're going to compete for each other and not get very high rankings, or it's just going to, get confused and jump between them. That's basically what's going to happen. If it's implemented correctly, you'll see each content piece is returned in its relevant search engine for that language. So the benefits are a higher audience reach and traffic in the countries with multiple languages. So you'll get a lot more exposure, increased search visibility and organic traffic in international countries. You can expand your business there, and increased opportunities to get backlinks to build authority on your domain. And this is great because it's local, those customers, those visitors, those users on your website will engage with the content, like the content, and then want to link back to it. So you have opportunity for greater backlink building. You'll be able to spot opportunities to fulfill gaps in search market demand because different countries, different languages may have different demands for different topics and different services and products. You also have a decreased page bounce rate and higher content engagement because it's really customized, it's really personalized to that audience. So if someone is a French-speaking customer lands on your English site, that's also for the UK, they might not resonate with the content as much as if it's in French for France, if they live in France. And then increased conversion rates because it's relevant for them higher engagement, they're more likely to purchase. So how does it work? So we're going to be talking about country versus language. You'll be meeting the Hreflang tag and what that actually is. We'll be talking about the difference between canonicalization versus Hreflang. We'll talk about international search engines and what one's out there. And then the different website structures. This is the key one that you'll learn how to actually structure your website for language, country, or language and country. And then foreign keyword research, how to best do that. We'll talk a quick bit about machine versus human translation. This is a big topic. And then finally, translation versus localization, what the difference is. So country versus language. So let's talk about what this means. Basically, a country can have multiple languages. So you might have a website or business that's targeting one country, but you want it in multiple languages. That's fine. Or you might have a website where a language can be spoken in multiple countries. So you might have, let's say, just English website, but it's targeting the UK, it's targeting Canada, the US, all of these countries, but it's still only in English. Or a language may have different dialects across different countries. So even though your website might be in French, you might be targeting Canadian customers or customers in France. And both speak French, but you want to make sure that it's customized to that audience because they're two different. There's differences in the culture, in the dialects, and all of that. So let's meet the Hreflang tag. So this little code snippet here is the Hreflang. And basically, it was a piece of code introduced by Google in December 2011. And it's a signal. It's not a must-have. It's not a directive. And it can be used to specify basically language of that content or a language and a country. And this little tag goes in the head section of a website on each page. So it basically tells search engines when they land on a page, oh, this page is English and it's meant to target the UK customers, or it's meant to target US market, or it's meant to target Canadian market. So basically specifies what where that should show up. Now, what's the difference between canonicalization versus Hreflang? If you haven't heard of canonicalization, it's basically a tool used to specify which page out of a set of duplicate or highly similar pages to return the search results. And basically, this is more for content that's within a specific language and a specific country. And we're not talking about international here. So I just want to make that distinction. While Hreflang is a tool used for international SEO to show which pages based on a specific language and or country should show up in a search. So there's two different things. They both tackle duplicate content, but they're used for two different purposes. So let's talk about some international search engines, so like Chinese search engines. So in China, they use Baidu, they use Sogu, Bing, Haosu, Shenma, Yandex, and these are basically the current market shares for these. So let's say you're going into China, make sure that you research the major search engines there, or any other international market. Let's say you are going into a different market, their market shares might be slightly different. Remember, every country might have different search engines, varying degrees of popularity. So let's talk about website structures and the terms relating to that. So you might have heard CCTLD. It's basically a country-specific top-level domain. So for example, example.co.uk. Or GTLD is a generic top-level domain. So you've heard of these, .com, .net, .org. These are generic and not specific to a country. Subfolder is basically a folder within the domain. A parameter is a variable in the URL with a specific value. A subdomain is a domain that's divided into separate spaces. For example, subdomain.example.com. And you can have multiple layers. You can have subdomain.example.com. But we'll show you how to use that in a moment. So firstly, let's say you're only targeting countries on your website. It's going to be in one language, but you're targeting multiple markets. So you can use a CCTLD, so country code specific top level domain, or you can use a generic top level domain plus a subfolder, or you can use a GTLD plus subdomain. So let me show you examples for each. So you could use like .uk if you're targeting the UK. You can use example.com/GB, GB as in Great Britain, that's the code, or gb.example.com. Or if your website is language only, it's in with one specific country, but you want to target multiple languages, you could use the GTLD plus subfolder, you could use a GTLD plus parameter, or you could use the GTLD plus subdomain. Let me show you examples. So example.com/en, en for English, example.com !lang equals en, or en.example.com. Now the final is the most complex, and it's the country plus language. So if your website is targeting multiple countries and multiple languages, then this is basically, there's 7 different main combinations that we recommend. So you have the GTLD plus subfolders, you have GTLD plus subfolder plus parameter, GTLD plus subdomain plus parameter, GTLD plus subdomain and subfolder, CCTLD plus subfolder, CCTLD plus parameter, and CCTLD plus subdomain. These are the different combinations, and I'll show you the examples so you can make sense of that. So you can have, for example, example.com/GB, so targeting England, and English/English, or /GB and then language, or gb.example.com and the parameter, or gb.example.com/en, or .uk en, or .uk lang en, or en.example.uk. Let's talk about foreign keyword research. For each country and or language, you want to do separate keyword research within these markets to find the highest value search terms and build and prioritize content around that. Why? Because each country and language may have different demands. For example, the cheese demand in the US versus the cheese demand in South Korea, it can vary completely differently. Or varying words or spellings within those countries. For example, jumper is used in the UK while sweater is used in Canada. Unique cultures. For example, in Spain, there's a food called paella, or in Mexico, there's a food called enchiladas. And if you're talking about specific examples of food, you might want to use a more local example in that country. Now, let's talk about the difference between machine versus human translation. So machine translation uses software to translate, but often has inaccuracies because it's just not perfect yet. And while human translation is actually the most accurate and should always be used if possible. The key is to preserve the meaning of the content when translating content, not necessarily translate the words, because that can really be botched up by the machine translation. So that's why a human translator can really understand the meaning of the text and then translate it accordingly to the local dialect. Now, what's the difference between translation versus localization? So translation is obviously the process of converting copy from one language into another while preserving the meaning of that copy as closely as possible, while localization takes translation one step further to take the dialects, the culture, and different words or spellings across countries or locales into consideration. So here are some easy ways to implement international SEO. So we'll talk about the 5 top SEMS platforms and the international SEO plugins and an alternative solution. So the top 5 CMS platforms out there in terms of market share are WordPress, Shopify, Wix, Squarespace, and Joomla. There's a lot more that might not be mentioned here, but you can do your research on Google. So let's talk about WordPress plugins. So you can use WPML, TranslatePress, Polylang, Multilingual Press, Weglot, or Babblik. For Shopify plugins, you can use Langify, Langshop, Multilingo, Weglot, or Babblik. For Wix plugins, you can use Wix Multilingual, Weglot, or Babblik. And for Squarespace plugins, you can use SquareCamp Multilingual, Multilingualizer plugin, Weglot, Babblik, or EasyLing. And Joomla plugins, Falang, JDiction, Speedy Translate, or Babblik. Now I want to highlight a few things first. So notice that Weglot and Babblik show up in most of these. Now these are third-party platforms that sit on top of these platforms. They're embedded and they translate from a basically JavaScript level on top of the website. Now the downside of that is it's hard to have a different structure for those pages. So you might have a page and then it's translated, let's say, into French, but it's the same URL. So Google might get confused as to, okay, is it French or English, this page, because it's the exact same URL. So that's why it's important to go for plugins that actually allow changing of the structure, so you can actually structure it based on what we spoke about earlier, the language, the country, or the country and language. So the alternative solution is to go with Hike SEO. So basically reach out to the Hike SEO support team and we can answer your questions to get clarity and direction on everything. We can help you to configure your website and content for international SEO as well. So finally, improving your performance. We'll talk about international signals, important metrics, and the next steps. So international signals are basically signals that signal search engines what country you're in, what country you're targeting, all of these things. So website hosting using a local IP address, link to local content or websites in that country, building backlinks from local sources, optimizing for local search engines. So let's say you're in China and you're optimizing for Baidu, sharing content on local social media platforms. All of these things give signals or hints to those search engines as to what locale, what country, what language that you're targeting, in addition to the Hreflang. Some important metrics to keep in mind when you're measuring the performance of international SEO are the keyword ranking, the visibility in different countries, the organic unique visits from those countries, average engagement rate, bounce rate. So bounce rate is, you want a low bounce rate, because bounce rate is when someone lands on the site and leaves within a few seconds. And so you want less of that. Average time on your website, you want more of that. Conversion rate, so you want a high conversion rate if you have sales or services on there that they purchase. The number of % returning visitors, you want people coming back to your website, and the specific locations. So next steps, use the Hike SEO platform to improve your international reach, translate and or localize your content, and ask for help if you don't know how to implement any of this. So thanks so much for watching this. If you have any questions or specific problems or challenges that you may have for international SEO, do let me know. Just comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. All right, have a fantastic day and speak soon.